know what that is. Yes.
It has its speed, its how it's
Okay. Okay. If I were to ask you on here, what are your two most important gauges? Which ones are you picking? Decide.
how the plane is oriented.
Okay. Luther?
The one with colors, the one with
Okay, so we got the one with the colors, and there's two of them up there with the colors. The one on the farthest left. Okay.
the one that
Any other guesses? Luke. Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay. Lisa? Compass. Okay, so two of your most important gauges on here are your altimeter. So that's the one that has the 0 and it looks like a clock, right? So that's called your altimeter. It has your altitude. And then the little one that if you play Call of Duty, it looks like a gun sight. Right? So that is called an attitudinator. You got it. So those being the two most important gauges, or two of the most important gauges. That's why they're actually right in front of you on the airplane as you fly. And one will directly affect the other. So if you are basically the gauge on the left there, it's looking at it like it's airplane wings, right? So if you're off, but you're up and high, you're going to be trying to make a turn, but it's going to affect your altitude. And same thing in the opposite direction. So even if you're climbing, even if you're gaining altitude, you always want your attitude to be flat. You always want it to be square to what you're looking at. So as we go into tonight's message, that's something I want you to be thinking about is, okay, first and foremost, why does Pastor Tyler have an airplane thing up on the screen? It's a little different. But two, how does your altitude and your attitude connect? And can your attitude affect your altitude? And you're like, I'm a human being, I'm on the ground, my altitude is 0, right? But it is true. So your attitude will directly affect your altitude, meaning how high and how many places you can go in this world. So, as some of you guys might know, guys, I gave you those so that you can be chill by yourselves. But so as some of you guys might know, I am a licensed pilot. Okay, so when I was a senior in high school, I went and I decided to go and get my pilot's license. Well, a lot goes into getting a pilot's license. You need about 60 flight hours, meaning actual time in the air. And you actually need classroom time. Imagine that. You need to learn how to be a pilot. They're not just going to be like, hey, here's keys to an airplane. Go have fun. Darn, I have to learn things. Unfortunate. Well, with all the time actually learning how to fly, because my dad was a pilot, so I was flying in airplanes from a younger age. Pretty simple. You push down, houses get bigger. You pull back, houses get smaller. Okay? Theoretically, very basic. Two of the hardest things to do when you're actually flying an airplane is talking on the radio and figuring out your weather. That is the two of the hardest things to do. Because again, you push down, houses get bigger. Pull back, they get smaller. So, going through a lot of class, they really put a lot of focus on the attitude of the airplane and obviously the altitudes that you fly at. Because depending on the direction that you go, if you're heading east, you have to go at a certain altitude, and if you're heading west, you have to fly at a certain altitude. Okay? So you have to know your direction, and you have to know what altitude you're flying at. But to do both of those things, you have to make sure your attitude is in the right place. So tonight, obviously, I want to talk to you guys about our attitude. So is it possible to position ourselves and have an attitude such that you fly right all the time? Is it possible to actually have an attitude where no matter what comes in life, you're going to be able to focus through it and stay even keeled? How many of you guys have been on an airplane before? Okay? Okay. So, out of you guys that have flown on an airplane, how many of you guys have experienced turbulence?
It sucks.
Right? Okay. So turbulence, for those that don't know, is pockets of hot air. So these pockets of hot air disturb the cold air that you're currently flying through, and they make it bumpy, right? They make it bouncy. They destabilize your life. Okay? It's a great metaphor. So while they're destabilizing your life, you still have to figure out a way to keep your attitude even. You still have to figure out a way to keep your plane flying at the same level that you're flying at, in the same direction that you're flying. Okay? So to do that, you have to be focused on your instruments. You always have to be focused on, okay, does everything look correct? Because they have this thing, it's called VFR and IFR. VFR, you guys, when you came to youth group night, you didn't know you're going to get basic flight lessons, but I'm going to give you basic flight lessons, okay? So VFR is visual flight rules, meaning I can look out of the cockpit window and see what's happening in front of me. And then there's IFR, okay? And what IFR is, those are instrument flight rules, okay? So instrument flight rules means at all times, I need to rely on my instruments. I need to be going through and I need to say, what are my instruments telling me? I need to believe and I need to trust in my instruments to give me the right directions so I know what my airplane is doing. In a lot of ways, that's a lot of faith. That's a lot of our relationship and our walk with God. How many times can we not see the landscape that's around us clearly? How many times can we not see what the next step in our world is going to look like? Pretty often for some, right? Some of us are like, man, I got this planned out. I know exactly what I'm going to do. When I was in middle school and high school, I was going to a military academy, probably playing baseball. I had it all planned out. I was going to be in the military for 4 years, then I was going to get out, probably be an engineer. It's going to be great. If any of you guys know me, that's not what I do now. I had to fly with my instruments, okay? I had to fly trusting in God. And when I did that, some things happened in my life. Some choices that I made influenced where I was going. That's exactly like instruments on an airplane. If you go through and you say, okay, I'm going to trust God no matter what comes up, you have to understand He's going to take you into some places that if you were actually looking out the window, you would sit there and you'd say, I don't want to be here. This isn't my plan. This is not where I want to be. But if you could actually trust your instruments, you'd know that there might be a big, scary mountain that's right next to you. And you might only be 100 feet away, 200 feet away. But as long as you trust your instruments and you trust in God, you're going to be surprised at where exactly He's going to take you and the path that you're going to go on. And understand with Him, you're always safe. So, some verses that I like to go to when I'm thinking about the attitude that we need to take in life and how it directly affects the world that we live in. Proverbs is always an amazing place to go. If you guys are trying to figure out, hey, I just need like daily encouragement, go to the Proverbs because they're amazing statements to give hope and to give wisdom and to give knowledge. Proverbs 23:7 says, a man thinks in his heart, and so it will be. So our thoughts and our attitudes shape who we are and the direction of our lives that it takes. When we cultivate a positive attitude, we actually create a foundation for soaring to brand new heights. So how many of us have heard the power of positive thinking? So there's truth to that. It's not always correct, but in a lot of ways, the thoughts that we take, the thoughts that we have in our life, if we're always down in the dumps, guess what? You're going to feel cruddy. You're going to feel like, oh, this isn't worth it. I don't want to be here. And that's going to spew out of you. We talked about the golden rule a few weeks ago. How can you expect something from others that you yourself aren't willing to pour out? So if you are just spewing out, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this situation. My life is terrible. Woe is me. Well, guess what? People are going to send that back to you. They're going to sit there and they're going to say, okay, well, he doesn't want to be here. Why give him the effort? Right? Why put in the effort to have that friendship with that person that obviously doesn't care to even be here, even give me the time of day? But that's why the Proverbs 23:7, as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. What that's saying is what you think of yourself, what you perceive as your identity, will shape your actual reality and what's around you. So your attitude will shape your altitude. That it's saying whatever your attitude is will determine the actual height that you can go in this world. That's why knowing what your biblical identity is so vital and so important. Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, and whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. So again, it's all about how we think. How many of us, if you were to weigh on a scale the positive thoughts in your life versus the negative thoughts in your life, are you going to have more positive thoughts or are you going to have more negative thoughts? That's a question only you can answer. My hope is that you'll have more positive thoughts. A saying that I cultivated this last year when it comes to my thought life, when it comes to positive thoughts versus negative thoughts, is there's the people that are a cup half full. There's the people that are a cup half empty. I want to do away with both of those. I want to have the most beautiful small cup you've ever seen because then I'm always full, right? So that way, no matter what my scale looks like, it could be the most beautiful scale you've ever seen. And if I'm constantly striving to think with positive thoughts and keeping my eyes and my mind on Christ and knowing what my identity is in Him, rather than saying, woe is me, I'll never get that far in life. I'll never be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, wow, I trusted in my instruments. I trusted in God. And look at this amazing adventure that I'm on. Because like I said, in high school, I got a pilot's license for the main point to go into the military, to fly jets, right? Who here has seen Maverick? Who's seen that new Top Gun, right? Well, like that is the coolest thing. Well, guess what? I thought that was the absolute coolest thing in the world. And so my goal, I was going to be Maverick. I was like, whoo, where's my goose? Like, let's do this thing. Yeah, I was going to be Tom Cruise. Like it was set in stone. I was going to be an engineer. As soon as I was done being Tom Cruise, I was going to get married and it was going to be awesome. That didn't happen. But guess what? If that would have happened, odds are I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't have an amazing, beautiful wife, and I wouldn't have two amazing little kids. Like, none of that would have been possible. But I decided to step out in faith and trust my instruments, trust in God, and say, where are you leading? What are you going to take me through? And when you do that, so many things can actually open up to you. So Colossians 3, verse 2 says, set your minds on things above, not on the earthly things. So our attitude influences where we set our minds. By focusing on heavenly values, we alleviate our perspective and actually shape what we see and how we see it and how we interact with it. So understand it's a really interesting thing in life when you can go through and you can say, this is a really hard situation, whatever your situation might be. But if you can sit there and say with confidence, no matter the turbulence that I'm about to face, I know that God's got me. So when you're in an airplane and you're looking at these instruments, they're going to tell you how to fly level and straight, right? But has anyone been to an air show? Okay. So at an air show, you got those cool planes, they'll do like loops and stuff like that. Well, there's no instruments to teach you how to do loops, right? There's no instruments that are like, all right, you want to do a 360 with a spin, like this is how you do it. It's not a video game. Like there's no button to say, okay, I'm going to click this and then I'm going to, toggle this and then my plane's going to do this. No, it's all done by feel. It's all done by experience. You can't experience things. You can't walk through life and say, I'm going to know exactly how to handle X, Y, and Z situations because we've never been in it. But one of the things that all of the stunt pilots have to wear is a parachute. And why do they wear parachutes? They wear parachutes because if that stunt goes wrong, guess what they're going to have to do? They got to leave their plane, right? So in life, we all have a parachute. If you know it or not, you've got a parachute. Some of us have 2 or 3 parachutes. Some of us have parents. That's your first parachute. To say, hey, look, here is every single thing that's happening in life. No matter what happens to you, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to take care of you and make sure that you succeed. Right? That's one parachute. Second parachute could be a good group of friends that come and they can say, hey, no matter what happens, I'm going to be there to love on you and to give you a hug and get you through it. But the most important parachute of them all, okay, here's a lesson. If a pastor is ever asking you a question, what is usually the answer? Does anyone know? Okay, so anytime a pastor asks you a question, if you're paying attention or not, you can usually just go with Jesus. And that's 75% of the time, it's going to be the right answer. And this time, it's the right answer. Okay? So yes, Jesus is always the answer. But understand that Jesus, Christ himself, is a parachute to us. No matter what we're going through, he's always there. Like I said, when I was going through school, I had this grand plan. It's going to a military academy. It's going to be Maverick, Top Gun. I was going to be an engineer once that was all said and done. Whew, it was going to be great. Going to live in a big house, probably somewhere on the East Coast, really, really doing it right. But my world changed and I needed a parachute. I needed somebody to come and say, hey, I'm there for you. Thankfully, I have amazing parents and they were there for me. But also in that moment, God was there for me. The very last verse of Matthew reads like this. It says, lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the age. That verse, that single verse was my parachute. Some of you guys might have a parachute. You might have a verse that you can go back to and say, God spoke to me through that verse. For me, I will never forget that verse. I'm not a fan of tattoos, but that verse will be forever tattooed on my heart, because that verse itself saved me and brought me back to know God on a deeper level. And so I tell you guys all this so that you know a part of my story, because I stand up here week after week, and I know a bunch of you guys probably sit there and say, you've had a very easy life, you haven't gone through what I have. And a lot of you are right. But there's also parts to our life that work as any testimony. And I did have a time in my life that wasn't the cleanest, it wasn't the best. But God still met me in that moment. He was still my parachute in that moment. And like I said, that verse, I will never forget that verse, because he spoke so vividly and so clearly through it. But I sit there sometimes and I say, man, if I had just known what my attitude needed to be, I would have been able to go through and possibly kept the altitude that I needed, so I didn't have that almost crash in my life. I could have sat there and I could have said, you know what? I know my identity. I know who my God is. I don't need to sit here and dwell on things that didn't go right in my human brain, because I know God. I know my instrument cluster is telling me everything is right. Everything is still going well. If you have a way that you can daily commune with God, do it. If it's worship, if it's prayer, if it's just sitting in silence and letting him speak through your environment, do it. Because when you know truly who you are in Christ and what your identity is, you're going to be surprised at the mountains that you're actually able to overcome when you have an attitude of gratefulness, that just every single day you get to be with God. You get to actually commune with him. On my way here, I was listening to a sermon, and the pastor brought up a verse, and I want to read it to you as we close here. But it is in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 8. So let me go there for us real quick. If I could find my book of Ecclesiastes, that would be fantastic. So you guys, this is even when your youth pastor has a hard time finding verses. Don't think that you're a bad Christian or something like that because you can't find verses as well. It happens. So, Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 15. It says, so I command and commend the enjoyment of life, because there is nothing better for a person under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then the joy will accompany them in their toil all the days of their life God has given them under the sun. So God actually commands us to have fun. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise, that, oh, because you're a Christian, you can't have fun. That's simply not the case. That's not true. The Bible itself tells us to have fun. Now, there's a difference between sinful fun. There's, sin that the world calls fun, and then there's everything else in the world. God is saying, hey, have fun. Do everything you can do. Obviously, following his commandments, following his teachings, but have fun with it. Eat, drink, be merry, right? So walk out that. Walk out that in your life. When you know, oh my goodness, you're going through a hard time, go to your identity. Go to the God that created you exactly who you're supposed to be. And have an understanding of the fact that he loves you and he created you perfect in every single way. And all he desires is to have a relationship with you. So that's where I'm going to leave us for tonight. guys, if you're in a place in your life that seems bumpy, that seems to have a lot of turbulence, understand you've got a lot of parachutes. You've got parachutes at this church. You have parachutes in your home. I know every single one of your homes. And guys, your parents all love you and they all care for you. No matter what you're going through, what your world looks like, if you just started life at a new school and it sucks, or if you're trying to figure out what the next step is and you can't see out your own window, trust that you have a parachute on, but trust that you have a God that understands exactly what he wants out of your life. And he wants to give you a beautiful ride. If you just trust in him and wholeheartedly know in your heart that he will never leave you nor forsake you, you are going to be able to walk out some beautiful things. So with that, I'm going to close in a prayer real quick, and then we can continue to have fun. So, Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much that you trust us and that you called us to higher places, and all we have to do is focus on you and to love you, and you will wholeheartedly love us in return. God, help us keep an attitude of gratitude. Help us keep an attitude that keeps us on an upward trajectory that avoids all the negative things. Help us to understand that what goes in will come out. And if we focus our life on the things that are uplifting and things of you, you're going to take us to places and help us avoid other things that we never even knew were there because you fought our battles for us. God, thank you for being our protector. In your beautiful name we pray.